Let us execute an immediate sweeping analytical vector shift away from the sleek corporate glass high-rises, billionaire inheritance clauses, and high society fake engagement contracts, and plunge directly back into the blinding, calculation-heavy tracking parameters of high fantasy court survival, weaponized magical trials, and the deeply precarious world of royal prisoners navigating a lethal Fae ecosystem. We are crossing the threshold directly into the hyper-monitored, shimmering architecture of a ruthless celestial monarch stronghold, forbidden magical inheritance grids, and the lethal analytical perimeters of a highly defiant protagonist weaponizing her wits inside a gilded cage. With Fate of the Sun King, the exceptional, pulse-pounding third structural deployment anchoring the globally dominant, chart-topping Artefacts of Ouranos series by the absolute undisputed sovereign of razor-sharp enemies to lovers trauma, unyielding possessive dynamics, and high-velocity dark fantasy pacing, Nisha J. Tuli. This high-stakes narrative tracking sequence delivers an exceptional look at an operational crossroads where a fierce, underestimated heroine running a brutal survival loop, a vicious, dangerously territorial conquering Sun King, and an absolute defense of a captive's personal sovereignty metrics collide at terminal velocity. Let us map the strategic narrative grid. If you are an elite enthusiast of high-octane, slow-burn fantasy thrillers where an endangered, hyper-observant female protagonist must navigate an absolute maze of corrupt royal court politics, lethal magical arena trials, and a deadly ring of active institutional gaslighting while running a blind survival loop inside a completely compromised kingdom ecosystem, where an analytical mind uses deep psychological profiling, hidden physiological parameters, and absolute mental stamina to outmaneuver an invisible predatory monarch, and where the author utilizes an incandescent captive royal forced into submission, unearthing a aided bond diagnostic routine to test our hero's structural limits, this book is engineered to lock you in. Tuli completely dominates the vicious king meets hidden princess dynamic, capturing the heart-racing intellectual momentum, suffocating institutional paranoia, and heavy deductive depth popularized by genrevars like Sarah J. Maas, Jennifer L. Armentrout, Teresa Broadbent, and Raven Kennedy, while treating realistic combative training logistics, complex personal alignment arcs, and protective royal bloodline tradecraft grids with absolute technical mastery. The narrative tracking grid zeroes in on the highly volatile, calculation-heavy baseline of our central heroine lore, operating under a severe calculation-heavy handicap of an exposed secret identity, intense magical suppression protocols, and a hyper-visible targeting profile by the Empire's ruling immortal warlords. Behind her rigorous palace labor footprints and tense dungeon logs lies an intricate matrix of hidden faction allegiances, deeply buried dynastic secrets, and sharp, high-stakes political maneuvers. Her collective defense mechanisms are locked down tight behind a lifetime of surviving the brutal Nostraza prison, her entire analytical focus strictly consumed by monitoring sudden threat vectors from rival court sycophants, parsing complex behavioral shifts from her powerful cold-eyed captor king, and shielding her vulnerable personal autonomy nodes from being entirely wiped out by a ruthless elite cleanup offensive. The spark ignites when an unexpected high-frequency structural anomaly breaches her active scanning perimeter, as the Aurora and Sun Court's conquest phases enter an increasingly lethal terminal tier, a series of suspicious palace sabotage attempts, targeted political setups, and calculation-heavy arena ambushes threaten to permanently eliminate her from the living registry. The official diagnostic metrics of the Royal Tracking Centers flash white-hot when her defensive maneuvers and raw emotional output reveal that her hidden magical alignment is radically impossibly matching the ancient energy signatures of the world's most coveted artifacts. The standard boundaries of routine royal captivity and peaceful prisoner protocols crumble, and our central protagonist runs completely out of standard diplomatic escape vectors. She is thrust directly into an active, invisible war across the sun-drenched fortress, where deceptive noble houses, highly manipulative court sorcerers, and a calculation-heavy underground resistance syndicate launch aggressive countermeasures to permanently suppress her advancement data stream. The tactical parameters instantly explode as their historical and survival warfare turns completely active, transforming the grand banquet halls, dark training grounds, and private royal bedchambers into a volatile psychological pressure cooker and a physical battle zone. The vicious king is purposeful and resolute, determined to deploy his massive intuitive tracking skills, overwhelming primal aura, and persistent emotional dominance to break his perimeter and force absolute
absolute submission, only to realize her hidden internal grit matches his own dark nature step for step. Our veteran survivalist protagonist is forced to deploy her massive intuitive tradecraft, environmental mapping skills, and raw emotional stamina to maintain her boundary lines before the next competitive punishment phase permanently deletes her progress. What follows is an exceptional, high-stakes war of perspective, tactical position, and raw human grit. We watch the Dark Elite's deceptive perimeters completely unwrapped as Tuli reveals that the true victory requires more than just surviving a dungeon or managing a toxic captive attraction. It demands an absolute, uncompromising defense of individual dignity, personal truth, and systemic survival against a cold, calculating machine of institutional hierarchy and supernatural supremacy. While our central characters smooth over each other's psychological and defensive blind spots with devastating analytical force, creating a fiercely protective, absolute web of dark possessive loyalty around their volatile union, a brutal series of close-quarters tactical confrontations and high-stakes evidentiary breakthroughs shifts the clock into its terminal phase, proving that historical emotional hazards have tracked them to their final outpost. To survive the impending locked grid trap and permanently secure her sanctuary, our resilient heroine must unleash an absolute, unyielding defense of her final boundary lines. It is a dark romance fantasy, captive trial suspense, royal court politics drama, high-velocity dark fantasy paranormal noir masterpiece that treats deep relational logistics and intense structural friction with elite precision. The tension here burns with a sharp, calculation-heavy intensity. We are talking about that high-frequency, one whispered secret triggers a fatal throne room showdown energy, where a sudden pause during an active court tactical briefing, an unexpected shift in an adversary's protective physical posture during a high-stakes courtyard confrontation, or a heavy, possessive realization that an elite immortal king has completely mapped your personal biological coordinates carries massive structural weight. Tuli writes with an exceptionally fresh, vivid, and beautifully blunt voice, perfectly capturing the cold, metallic clang of iron shackles, the oppressive, heavy atmosphere of an elite testing pavilion before an execution trial, and the distinct, subtle scent of polished gold, dark magic ozone, burning incense, expensive parchment, wet stone, spilled copper, and pure, unadulterated suspense. What truly elevates this third installment into elite territory is the author's unmatched ability to balance complex, high-stakes court dynamics and genuine dark romance tradecraft, alongside a breathtaking narrative pace and deep emotional hooks. Our protagonists don't rely on unbelievable, superficial Hollywood superhero action tropes. Their immense situational intelligence, strategic patience, and profound survival instincts match the complexity of the chaotic, modern corporate and aristocratic underworld they dominate step for step, making their choices to risk everything feel profoundly authentic and deeply gripping. The pacing moves with calculated momentum, tracking intense conversational standoffs and breathtaking tactical breakthroughs before ratcheting up to an absolute jaw-dropping conclusion that delivers total, hard-earned advancement to their horizon. Fate of the Sun King is the definitive pro-level upgrade your high-stakes dark fantasy and intense captive suspense library demands right now. It is elegant, immensely fast-paced, and utterly unputtable. It proves that when your entire sanctuary is targeted by a cold, calculating institutional monster, the most revolutionary play you can execute is to lock your perimeters, trust your elite survival training, and fight like hell alongside your network to rewrite the data. So secure your personal reading sanctuary, review your emotional defensive perimeters, open your Kindle, and prepare to track the